Breathing rate is decreased because respiratory muscles will get stronger um, to aid oxygen deficit, and EPOC because the system would work less to get the same result. This would mean that breathing rate that because respiratory muscles are stronger, breathing rate you won't have to breathe as much because more air can be pushed out, and also the muscles can relax and be more flexible. Also, the alveoli, um, their surface area will increase with this is one of the adaptations, and more alveoli just means that more gases exchange can occur, so more of the switching of oxygen and carbon dioxide, which also means that more oxygen will be produced naturally. So if there's more alveoli, there's more oxygen. The lung volumes in particular, the resting reserve volume will slightly change and will get slightly lower. That would be to increase tidal volume and the vital capacity. The vital capacity only goes up slightly, and there's an increase in VO2 max because of this. There's also an increase in the oxygen diffusion rate. That's also because of the same alveolar surface area. Now we're going to move on to a VO2 max test. This is before and after exercise. So as you can see here that there's an increase of the VO2 milliliters and milliliters, and it increases as the running speed also increases. And then there's an area between 13 and 14 where VO2 goes up quite a lot, and then it goes back down to increase at a steady rate. Now this increase will still occur after your 6 week period or so, 6 weeks or so. But it does start off low, so your VO2 will start lower, so your oxygen consumption is a lot lower as well. This is because the body doesn't have to work as hard because of those adaptations we just talked about. And you can see that there's still an increase there's still a really rapid increase at one point, but that is slightly later because the body does not hit that point as quickly as it does when the VO2 is higher and oxygen consumption is higher to begin with. Now we're going to take a look at the neuromuscular system, and these adaptations occur. You'd see an adaptation in tendon strength. There'll be muscle fiber hypertrophy. Also, the proprioceptors will adapt, and force generated will be larger, and there'll be a quicker neural pathway. Now, tendons tend to get stronger, so that muscle stability can be increased, and this would easily just reduce the risk of injury. This means that the muscle can work for longer periods of time without getting injured or fatigued. So it will be able to work for longer periods with a higher resistance to fatigue, especially in those low oxidated muscle fibers. And it will work as quickly as it can because fibers wouldn't have to work as hard. Fibers also increase in mass, so slightly they go through hypertrophy as well, but it's not as massive as heart hypertrophy would be or skeletal muscle hypertrophy would be. They tend to occur in fast glycolytic and fast oxidative glycolytic fibers. That's why sprinters versus endurance runners may have different physiques. So sprinters tend to look a lot more bulkier than those long distance runners would be because the slow oxidated muscle fibers do not go through as large as a hypertrophy as the fast glycolytic fibers do. If the fibers increase, that means that they will be able to produce larger forces and can be sustained for longer periods of time. So, with the resistance to fatigue. And in aerobic training, myoglobin stores would increase because more oxygen will be stored in the muscles, which means muscles will be able to work for longer periods of time. When talking about the neural pathway, the receptors and the proprioceptors and the central nervous system will be working a lot quicker because after or while they're training and adapting, they will have to send signals a lot more quickly. So these things like reaction speed, reaction time, and just how quickly the body can adapt to certain situations will increase as well. Now, looking at the want data on the Wingate test, we can see that people would start. So this is showing the peak power input, the peak power output, sorry, the fatigue index, the maximum heart rate, the end RP, and the lactate produced. And you can see that large forces tend to be, for the peak, tend to be quite high, but they're not sustained for quite long. And the fatigue index is also quite high, especially in these amateurs. This is just showing. This would just show that how the heart rate can. So also, this is not just showing neuromuscular adaptations, but also in the CV system, where you see the heart rate before and after. Now it doesn't show the adaptation of it, but you can get an idea that the heart rate does have to work at um, a certain BPM at this time. But if you were to come at 6 weeks after someone was training, you may see that their maximum heart rate decreases and they get similar results. Now, if we look at if you can, these are professional athletes now, and if we look at them in comparison to those younger athletes, you can see that people such as Chris Hoy reached a maximum power output of 2,200 watts, which is quite a lot, and it's quite hard to beat. Now we're going to take a look at the energy systems. Now, in energy systems, the main thing that happens is an increase in stores, both anaerobic and aerobically. So for aerobic, for example, glycogen stores will increase and muscle glycogen stores also increase slightly. And this just means that energy can be outputted for longer periods of time without just depleting completely. Different fuel sources as well also can contribute to how the energy systems work efficiently. So if you're able to digest fat and carbohydrates and those things more quickly or more efficiently, that means that they can be used better, and that can cause you to be able to perform for longer periods of time at a higher standard. So if you link this to training, for example, if you're constantly training for a long distance event and you're doing continuous training, or you're doing various types like cross training or those things, then you would see that the body will be able to deal with carbohydrates more better, or be able to use them a lot better, along with the other adaptations would also help. It'll be able to deal with that a lot better, so it could use it for longer and increase the glycogen stores. So those are the free fatty acids for aerobic. Also in anaerobic, so phosphocreatine, for example, when those stores increase, you'll be able to um, work maximally for slightly longer, and the enzymes would also increase the rate a lot quicker. Um, Stuff like LA buffering and tolerance, especially for anaerobic athletes such as like 200-meter runners, 400-meter runners, they need to improve their lactic acid tolerance and have delay OBLA. This is because they need to be able to run for longer tolerating lactic acid. So if they constantly work on running while tolerating lactic acid, they would definitely have a better chance of performing better, because the body will adapt and the energy systems will adapt to suit, so that it does tolerate lactic acid a lot more. So now if we look at RPEs, which is what athletes use to gauge how hard an exercise feels, we can see that for this running one, that it steadily goes up as the running speed increases, and that's also time increases, and that is basically just the receipt of how much they feel, how tired they feel on a scale of 0 to 20. So you can see at stage 11 that this athlete definitely stopped at this stage because he was almost at 20. And if he did continue to work on this for 6 weeks, he would be able to carry on for longer period. He would be able to probably make it to probably level 13 or level 14, depending on how hard he worked. Now, if you look at the lactate threshold, lactate threshold test, you can see that speed as well. This is the same athlete. As the speed increased, so did the blood lactate, and his heart rate as well. And if an athlete did do the training, the lower line, you'd see that the threshold would look totally different, with similar pattern going upwards, but it would be delayed and it would be a lot lower as well. He probably would be able to go for longer periods of time, so that line should be slightly longer. Now, if we take a look at skeletal adaptations, we can see that certain things such as weight bearing or resistance training can help to increase bone density. It can also stimulate minerals, so it would also increase calcium stores, cartilage thickness, and also strength, of course. Now, when we do high resistance training or weight bearing training, the bone density is forced to get stronger, or the bones are forced to get stronger, and the bone density increases. And that's because because the osteoclast and osteoblasts have to work more efficiently to produce stronger bones, and the calcium store is also higher, which helps a lot more because it can produce these osteoblasts and osteoclasts. More of them, they can produce more osteoclasts and osteoblasts, and this can help avoid osteoporosis, of course, because these things will be produced a lot more quickly, and a lot more. Also, once you're exercising constantly, and you do your stretching or whatever as well, your range of movement around the joint can be increased, and that would of course decrease the risk of decrease the risk of injury for that particular athlete. The cartilage as well gets thicker, and the synovial fluid also increases, so there's more synovial fluid and the cartilage gets thicker, and that is because more padding is needed if your body is constantly having to work out or train, and the synovial fluid will produce more so that the joints can move a lot more smoothly, and it just makes life a lot easier and reduces the risk of any injuries. The tendon strength and the stretch of ligaments, they become more strong and tolerant. Ligaments can be stretched a lot more because if they're constantly being stretched, they will eventually adapt to suit. And so the tendons, they will become a lot stronger. This also helps with reduce the risk in injury. And that's what mainly all of these skeletal adaptations are. It makes everything easier for everyone else. For all the other systems and adaptations are made easy because of these things. The skeletal muscles also, the skeletal system will also improve the adaptations would just improve the athlete's overall strength, not strength, yeah, so strength and ligaments or tendons and together just to help them completely. So like athletes such as javelin throwers, they would need high skeletal adaptation so that they can throw a lot further, have that wider range of movement, stronger tendon strength, and stronger ligament strength.